Listen closely, chosen one. What has been rising in you is not exhaustion. It is not confusion. It is certainly not coincidence. There is a sign moving through your spirit right now, and most people misread it, mistaking a holy summons for nothing more than a bad week. You have been calling it stress, a restlessness that will not settle no matter how much rest you get, an ache nothing in this world seems able to satisfy. Hear this plainly. What you are carrying is the breath of God, awakening something heaven-marked long before you noticed it stirring. Jeremiah 1 verse 5 says, "Before I formed thee in the belly I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." Before your first breath, you were already known, already set apart, already carrying a shape only heaven could see. What is surfacing now is the original calling finally pushing its way to the surface. This stirring is quiet enough to be dismissed and powerful enough to rearrange everything once you notice it. It does not shout with the noise of the world, nor borrow the language of passing spiritual trends. It moves the way a current moves beneath still water, invisible from the surface, undeniable once you feel it pull. Not everyone carries this weight. It is rare because it is costly, and cost requires a carrier already prepared to hold it. If you are sensing it, you are not imagining significance where none exists. You are being trusted with something that will reach further than your own life. This activation is not reserved for people with a platform or a title. It shows up just as powerfully in a parent folding laundry at midnight, a nurse finishing a double shift, a student unsure what comes after graduation. Significance here was never about visibility. It is about willingness available to you exactly as you are right now. Over the sections ahead, we will name exactly what this activation touches, so what you have been feeling stops being a mystery and starts becoming a map. By the last sign, you will understand why this rarely happens to someone who is not ready for it. Stay with me. What is stirring in you already knows where it is going. It has simply been waiting for you to catch up. 1. The life you built no longer fits you. Will you notice it in the smallest moments, which is exactly why it catches you off guard. Driving the same route you have driven 100 times. Folding laundry on a Tuesday evening. Standing in a kitchen you have stood in for years. And suddenly, without warning, something about it all feels foreign, like a life you are visiting rather than a life you actually live. That moment is not collapse, and it is not weakness pretending to be insight. It is a holy signal that you have outgrown what once fit comfortably. Ephesians 4 verse 22 to 24 describes this directly, that ye put off concerning the former conversation the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. The language here is anything but gentle. It describes removal and replacement, not a light adjustment. Picture a moving crew taping up boxes at the end of a long day, some labeled keep and others labeled donate. Working quickly because the decisions have already been made, even if the sorting still takes time. That is close to what is happening inside you right now. Certain parts of your former life are being marked for release, not because they were worthless, but because they were only ever meant for a season that has ended. If you pay attention, you will notice the roles you once wore with pride, starting to feel like clothing cut for someone else's frame. The career that used to anchor your identity may feel strangely hollow. The routines that once gave you structure may now feel like they are keeping you smaller than you were built to be. This is where grief and relief tend to arrive together, which confuses people the first time it happens. You can mourn what is ending while also exhaling, as though something heavy has finally been set down. Both responses are allowed, both are part of the same process. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17 says it with striking clarity. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Far from a poetic idea meant to comfort you from a distance, this is an experiential reality you are living through right now, in real time, whether or not you have words for it yet. Try this instead of simply enduring the dismantling. Take an honest inventory this week. Ask yourself plainly which roles, habits, and relationships still feel true, and which ones you have only been maintaining out of habit or fear of disappointing someone. Or you do not need to act on every answer immediately. This kind of renewal always begins with an honest look at what is actually there, before it ever becomes a matter of taking new action. Letting go rarely happens cleanly. It can feel like being pulled between the person you used to be and the person now calling you forward. That tension is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is the exact place where God tends to work most precisely, because tension is what finally forces a decision that comfort alone would never have required. It is also worth saying plainly that this dismantling is not punishment for anything you have done wrong. Some people quietly assume that if a season feels this uncomfortable, it must be correction for failure. That assumption keeps people stuck longer than the process itself ever would. The scaffolding coming down around you is not evidence of a mistake. It is simply what happens when a structure has served its purpose and something sturdier is ready to take its place. Trust the discomfort as a sign of progress rather than proof of fault. New frequency, familiar faces. Something shifts in the company you keep almost as soon as the old self begins loosening its grip. You sit across from someone you have known for years, and the conversation suddenly feels like it is happening in two different languages. Nothing dramatic occurred. No one said anything wrong. But the frequency has changed, and not every relationship built for the old frequency can rise to meet the new one. A tuning fork struck once in a quiet room does not shout to be heard. It simply hums at its own frequency, and only the objects already tuned to match it will begin to resonate in response. Everything else in the room stays silent, not out of hostility, but because resonance cannot be forced. That is close to what is happening in your relationships right now. Some people will resonate with the frequency rising in you. Others, through no fault of their own, simply will not. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 14 warns against being unequally yoked, using the image of two animals pulling in different directions and wearing each other down in the process. You may feel that strain already, in laughter that suddenly feels forced, in conversations that no longer nourish you the way they once did. That discomfort is not arrogance. It is evidence that your spirit has matured past what those exchanges were ever able to offer. Boundaries begin to matter here in a way they may not have before. Proverbs 13 verse 20 teaches, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed." A boundary in this season is not punishment aimed at anyone. It is protection for what God is currently forming in you. The same way a gardener protects a young plant from wind, it is not yet strong enough to withstand. This does not mean every difficult relationship should be discarded quickly. Some friction is simply the natural result of two people growing at different speeds, and speed alone does not determine whether a relationship still belongs in your life. What matters more is direction. Ask honestly whether the people around you are generally moving toward greater honesty, humility, and faith, even if slowly, or whether the relationship consistently pulls you backward into old patterns you have already outgrown. Direction, not pace, is the better measure of whether to stay or release. The isolation that sometimes accompanies this realignment can feel disorienting, even lonely. But it functions less like abandonment and more like a filter clearing space for what has not yet arrived. Psalm 27 verse 10 offers real comfort here. "When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up." When people step back during this season, it does not mean you have been left exposed. It often means you are being repositioned closer to the one orchestrating who comes next. Instead of forcing a decision about every relationship at once, bring each one honestly before God in prayer this week. Ask specifically, "Lord, show me who to draw closer, and show me who to release without resentment." This turns a painful season of drifting into an intentional act of discernment rather than something that simply happens to you. Grieve where grief is needed, bless what is ending without needing to defend it as failure. and trust that the same God rearranging your circle now is the God who will fill it again with people who do not compete for your attention, but multiply your strength. It helps to remember that not every relational shift is permanent. Some people simply need time to catch up to a frequency you have already moved into, and forcing a final verdict too early can close a door that was only ever meant to stay ajar. Give space where space is wise, but do not confuse temporary distance with permanent loss. Let time and honesty reveal which relationships were seasonal and which were simply waiting for you to grow into a version they could finally meet. 3. You feel everything now. Rooms begin to speak to you in ways they never did before. A gathering that used to energize you now leaves you strangely depleted. You meet someone and sense, almost immediately, something about the weather of their soul that has nothing to do with what they actually said. This is not your imagination working overtime. It is the spirit opening a layer of perception that was always available, but had never been activated. At first, this sensitivity can feel like too much. Noise that used to fade comfortably into the background now feels sharp, almost unbearable. 1 Kings 19 verse 11 to 13 gives us a picture worth returning to here. Elijah witnessed wind, earthquake, and fire, but God's voice was found in none of them. It came instead in a still, small voice, deliberately quiet against the backdrop of everything loud that had come before it. Your spirit is being trained toward exactly that kind of listening. A hearing aid technician works slowly in a quiet fitting room, adjusting volume levels down slightly at a time until sound becomes clear instead of overwhelming. Calibration, not amplification, is the goal. What feels like oversensitivity right now is often simply an instrument being tuned for accuracy rather than broken by exposure. Proverbs 4 verse 23 instructs plainly, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Guarding your heart in this season may look practical rather than mystical. It might mean reducing how much noise you allow into your day, stepping back from constant scrolling, or protecting small pockets of silence where your soul can actually catch its breath. None of this is escape. It is calibration, the same careful adjustment a technician makes one small turn at a time. This heightened sensitivity often extends beyond people and rooms into your own inner life as well. You may notice thoughts and emotions surfacing with unusual clarity. Old wounds you thought were long resolved suddenly, asking for attention again. None of this is regression. A quieter, more attentive spirit simply tends to notice what a busier, louder one used to override. Treat what surfaces with the same gentleness you would offer someone else in pain, because that is exactly what is being asked of you toward yourself. Not every impression you sense is automatically truth simply because it feels strong, so bring what you discern to trusted, wise counsel before acting on it. Testing an impression is not doubt, it is wisdom, and it keeps a genuine gift from being distorted by exhaustion or assumption. Your exhaustion in crowded, noisy environments is not a weakness to apologize for. It is a signal that you need to withdraw and refill before you try to pour out again. What is happening in your nervous system right now is not failure. It is tuning, and tuning always feels uncomfortable before it feels clear. There is also a temptation worth naming honestly in this season, the temptation to treat heightened sensitivity as superiority. Feeling more is not the same as understanding more, and discernment untethered from humility quickly curdles into judgment, dressed up as spiritual insight. Hold what you sense with open hands, offer it gently rather than as verdict, and let time confirm what only time can confirm. A sensitive spirit that stays teachable will go much further than one that assumes its every impression is automatically accurate. For the need to prove yourself starts to die. Somewhere in the middle of this process, the drive that once pushed you to compete, to prove, to outpace everyone around you, begins losing its grip almost without you trying to release it. You can still work hard. You can still build things that matter. But applause stops being the fuel that gets you out of bed, and something steadier takes its place. Luke 10 verse 20 records a striking redirection. "Rejoice not that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice, because your names are written in heaven." The scoreboard that used to feel so urgent starts to look strangely small next to that kind of permanence. Applause is loud but short-lived. What heaven records does not depend on an audience at all. Somewhere backstage, a stagehand adjusts a spotlight moments before the curtain rises, working entirely out of view, unseen by the crowd that will only ever notice the performer standing in the light. The stagehand's work matters just as much, arguably more, even though no one claps for it. There is a kind of contribution this season is teaching you to make peace with, work that matters deeply and gets noticed by almost no one. Philippians 3 verse 7-8 captures the shift with unusual honesty. But what things were gain to me, those I counted loss for Christ, that I may win Christ. Ambition has not disappeared here. It has simply been redirected towards something that does not evaporate the moment the room empties. Instead of asking how big something will become, you find yourself asking whether it is actually what you were asked to do, which is a much quieter, much more durable question. The next time you complete something meaningful, resist the urge to immediately measure its reception. Let a full day pass before checking how it landed with others, if you check at all. Use that space instead to simply notice how the work felt while you were doing it, whether it felt like worship or performance. That single pause, repeated often enough, retrains the part of you that has been trained for years to seek the crowd's verdict before trusting your own sense of calling. This shift does not mean ambition disappears entirely, and it should not be mistaken for passivity or a loss of drive. What changes is the source of motivation, not the intensity of effort. You can still work with excellence, still pursue growth, still care deeply about quality. The difference is subtle but decisive. You are no longer building a case for your own worth. You are simply offering what you have been given and letting the outcome belong to someone who never needed your performance to love you in the first place. 5. Time stops obeying the clock. Somewhere in this unfolding, you begin to notice that time itself feels different than it used to. Minutes stretch in ways that make no logical sense. Long seasons of apparent delay suddenly collapse into a single decisive week. It is as though your life has begun moving to a rhythm that clocks were never built to measure. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 puts words to this shift. He hath made everything beautiful in his time. Not in your rushed timeline, not according to your anxious deadlines. In his time, which operates by a different kind of math altogether, one where preparation and waiting are not wasted, but woven directly into the outcome. A cartographer redrawing a coastline years after the original survey traces new curves shaped slowly by tides that worked so gradually no single day of erosion looked significant. Only across years does the new shoreline become visible enough to chart. Some of what you are becoming right now is being shaped exactly that way, too slowly to notice day by day, yet undeniable once you compare where you are to where you started. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds you that a vision waits for its appointed time and will not lie, and though it may seem to linger, it will surely come. Delay, in heaven's language, is rarely the opposite of movement. It is frequently disguised precision, timing so exact that it would collapse the outcome entirely if it arrived even a little too early. Or John 11 verse 40 records Jesus asking Martha a piercing question in the middle of what looked like unbearable delay. Said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Lazarus's story was never really about rescue arriving on time. It was about something greater than rescue arriving exactly when it needed to. There is often a specific moment in seasons like this where the delay feels almost cruel, where the gap between what has been promised and what has actually arrived stretches longer than seems reasonable. That gap is not evidence of neglect. It is frequently the exact space where trust is being formed, because trust built entirely on quick answers rarely survives the first real test. What is being built in the waiting is often sturdier than what could have been built by immediate resolution. Patience in this season should never be mistaken for passivity. Active patience looks like continuing to prepare even while nothing visible is happening yet, like praying specific prayers instead of vague ones. like taking the next small step of obedience without demanding to see the whole staircase first. Each morning before your day begins, ask yourself a single honest question. Is there a step in front of me today, even a small one, that I have been avoiding simply because I cannot yet see where it leads? Take that step. Kairos moments tend to find people already in motion, not people waiting at a standstill for certainty to arrive first. There is a particular frustration that surfaces when this bending of time first begins, especially for anyone who has built their life around productivity and measurable progress. It can feel deeply uncomfortable to move at a pace that cannot be justified on a calendar or explained to someone asking for updates. Resist the urge to manufacture visible movement simply to satisfy that discomfort. Some of the most important work happening in you right now will never show up on anyone's timeline, including your own, until the appointed moment finally arrives. 6. Withdrawal becomes worship. The deepest hunger in this season rarely asks for more noise. It asks for quiet, the kind most people are trained to avoid rather than seek. Exodus 33 verse 7 paints a picture worth holding on to here. Moses pitched a tent of meeting outside the camp, away from the crowd, and everyone who sought the Lord went out to meet him there. That withdrawal was never rejection of the people. It was alignment with the presence that would eventually serve them best. Luke 5 verse 16 tells us something simple and important about Jesus himself. He withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. If the most consequential public life in history required regular, deliberate withdrawal, it is worth questioning any assumption that your own life could sustain its assignment without the same rhythm. A night shift baker checks dough by feel rather than by the clock on the wall, pressing gently to sense whether it has risen enough, because some processes cannot be rushed by watching the time and can only be judged by paying close attention. Solitude works the same way. It cannot be measured only in minutes. It has to be entered with attention, or it does very little. Solitude does not require dramatic gestures. Sometimes it looks like a multi-day retreat, and other times it looks like a 5-minute pause taken deliberately in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. A short walk taken with your attention actually turned toward God instead of toward your phone. What matters is not the length of the withdrawal, but the honesty of the attention brought into it. For those with demanding schedules, families, or caregiving responsibilities that make extended solitude genuinely difficult, take heart. God has never required identical conditions from everyone he calls into stillness. What he asks for is honesty within whatever space is actually available, whether that is a car parked quietly before the school run or a bathroom door closed for 4 unhurried minutes. Small and consistent will always outperform large and occasional. This week, choose one recurring window, even 15 minutes, and protect it fiercely as a non-negotiable appointment with God, the same way you would protect a meeting you could not afford to miss. Guard it before your day fills up around it, not after. Solitude entered this way is never the final destination. What is received there is meant to be carried back into ordinary life, the same way Moses returned from the tent with instructions for the people waiting outside. Withdrawal is sacred, but re-entry is where the fruit of it becomes visible to everyone else. If solitude has felt unfamiliar or even uncomfortable so far, that discomfort will likely fade the more consistently you practice it. Many people avoid quiet, not because they dislike it, but because they have never given it enough time to become familiar. The first several minutes of stillness often surface restlessness before they surface peace. Do not mistake that early discomfort for evidence that withdrawal is not working. Stay a little longer than feels convenient, and let the noise in your own mind settle before deciding the silence has nothing to offer you. 7. A mission hums beneath your breath. There comes a point in this process where you sense something stirring that you cannot fully name yet, a low, steady hum beneath your everyday thoughts that will not go quiet no matter how busy you keep yourself. It is not noise, and it is not random. It is the early sound of a mission you have not been shown in full detail, only in outline. 1 Samuel 3 verse 10 gives language to this exact posture. When the Lord called young Samuel by name in the middle of the night, Samuel eventually answered, "Speak, for thy servant heareth." He did not have the whole assignment yet. He simply learned to respond honestly to the voice calling him before understanding fully what it would require. Picture a greenhouse worker moving a seedling from a small starter tray into a much larger pot, long before anyone watching could guess what the plant will eventually become. The transfer itself does not reveal the final shape. It simply gives the roots room they will need later, room they could not have used yet in the smaller container. Much of what is happening in you right now works the same way, preparing capacity for something not yet visible. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 reminds you that the plans God holds for you are for good, woven with hope and a future, but rarely delivered all at once. Most of the time, the mission unfolds in layers, one obedient step revealing just enough of the next step to keep moving. Your responsibility is not to force clarity ahead of schedule. It is to respond honestly to what has already been shown. There is a wider pattern worth trusting here. Individual pieces of this process will rarely look purposeful in isolation, including some seasons that felt entirely wasted at the time. Only in hindsight, once enough pieces are gathered, does the shape of the whole thing usually become visible. Trust the gathering even while individual pieces still look scattered and unrelated to one another. Begin keeping a simple written record of impressions, recurring themes, or unusual promptings this week, even the ones that seem too small to matter. Do not try to interpret every entry immediately. Review it after a month has passed. Patterns tend to surface in hindsight that were completely invisible in the moment they were written down, and what looked like scattered notes will begin to read like the outline of something intentional. Resist the pressure, whether it comes from others or from yourself, to name your mission publicly before it has fully formed. Samuel did not announce a title for himself the night he first answered God's voice. He simply responded to what was asked of him in that moment, and clarity accumulated from there, one obedience at a time. A mission spoken too early, before it has had time to mature in secret, often gets shaped more by the expectations of an audience than by the actual assignment. Let it grow quietly a little longer before you feel obligated to explain it to anyone. 8. You can no longer wear the mask. Alongside the mission comes a kind of breaking that most people do not expect. The performance you have carried for years, the smile arranged carefully to hide the ache, the words chosen mainly to please rather than to be honest, stops being sustainable. It is not that you decide to stop pretending. It is that pretending simply stops working the way it used to. Galatians 1 verse 10 names the tension directly. For do I now persuade men, or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. That is no small adjustment. It is a full reordering of priority, one that, once it begins, does not easily reverse itself. This shift comes with real cost. Some relationships were built specifically around the polished version of you, and they will not survive contact with the unfiltered version now emerging. That loss is genuinely painful, and it deserves to be named honestly rather than spiritualized away. But in the space that opens up, room appears for people who were never drawn to your performance in the first place, only to the presence of something real underneath it. There is a particular kind of freedom that arrives once you stop calculating how a version of yourself will be received before deciding whether to offer it. That calculation, run constantly and often unconsciously, is exhausting in ways most people never fully register until it stops. Removing the mask is not simply about becoming more honest with others. It is about no longer needing to manage an entire second self whose only job was managing everyone else's perception of you. John 3 verse 30 offers the clearest description of what this authenticity actually requires. He must increase, but I must decrease. Even your no begins to carry different weight in this season, no longer soaked in guilt or over-explanation, but simply an honest boundary offered without apology. Romans 12 verse 1 calls you to present yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is a costly kind of honesty rather than a comfortable one. Identify one relationship or setting where you have been performing rather than participating, and choose one small, honest thing to say the next time you are there. Not a dramatic confrontation, just one true sentence where a polished one used to go. Authenticity rarely arrives all at once. It accumulates one honest sentence at a time. It is worth acknowledging that this kind of honesty will occasionally be misunderstood, sometimes even by people who love you. Not everyone will know what to do with a version of you that no longer performs for approval. Some will adjust and draw closer. Others will quietly step back, uncertain how to relate to someone who has stopped playing a familiar role. Both responses are survivable. What is not survivable long-term is continuing to perform simply to avoid the discomfort of being misunderstood by people who only ever knew the mask. 9. Guarding the flame. None of what has been stirred in you over these previous sections is guaranteed to last on its own. Activation without stewardship tends to fade quietly, not through dramatic failure, but through simple neglect. What God has awakened in you now requires rhythms that protect it the way a flame requires shelter from wind it did not ask for. Matthew 6 verse 33 offers the clearest starting instruction available. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The order matters more than most people realize. A day that begins with even a few minutes of unhurried attention toward God tends to bend differently than a day that begins already reacting to everything else. Boundaries become essential here, not as restriction but as protection for what is still forming. Hebrews 10 verse 24 to 25 reminds you not to neglect meeting together, but instead to consider how to spur one another toward love and good works. A small, trusted circle, not a crowd, becomes the covering that helps you test what you are sensing rather than carrying it entirely alone. Choose this circle with care. Not everyone who wants access to your journey has earned the right to speak into it, and discernment here protects both you and the process still unfolding inside you. Even your body plays a role in this stewardship. Colossians 3 verse 23 calls you to do everything, whatever it is, as though working for the Lord rather than for people, and that includes how you treat rest, movement, and the ordinary maintenance of your physical life. Neglecting the body while chasing the spiritual eventually undermines both. Choose one weekly rest period and protect it as non-negotiable, starting this week, treating it not as indulgence, but as an act of trust that your worth was never actually tied to your output. Pair that with the revelation record from the previous section, reviewed monthly rather than daily, so you can watch patterns emerge slowly instead of demanding instant clarity. Small, consistent faithfulness compounds in ways that dramatic bursts of intensity rarely do. Guard what has been lit in you. It was never meant to flicker once and go out. Stewardship in this season is rarely glamorous, and that is precisely why so many people neglect it once the initial intensity of activation begins to settle. The early stirring often comes with energy that makes discipline feel unnecessary. But energy fades, and rhythm is what carries a person through the seasons energy alone cannot sustain. Build your habits now, while the flame is still fresh, rather than waiting until it has already dimmed to realize how much maintenance it actually required. Friend, none of what has stirred in you over these sections was meant to be admired from a careful distance. It was meant to be lived. Isaiah 61 verse 1 to 3 describes exactly this kind of sending. The Spirit of the Lord anoints you to bring good news to the afflicted, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives. That is not a quiet invitation to feel something. It is a commissioning to walk in what has already been placed inside you. What began as a private, almost invisible stirring was never intended to remain private forever. Obedience carried out in hidden places has a way of reaching further than anyone standing nearby could have predicted, echoing into rooms you may never personally enter. There is no pressure to perform hidden in that truth. It is simply the nature of a seed, once finally planted, rather than merely admired in the packet. You do not need full clarity before you take the next step. Waiting for the entire picture before moving has delayed more people than any genuine obstacle ever has. A small step taken in faith carries more weight than a large plan endlessly postponed. Speak your next step out loud if you need to, even if all you can name is the first move rather than the destination. Movement, however small, has always mattered more to heaven than certainty. Carry what has been activated in you the way a lamp is carried, unhidden and unapologetic, into rooms that may not yet know they are waiting for it. You are not asked to be impressive. You are asked to be faithful with what has already been placed in your hands. That has always been enough, and it still is. Wherever you find yourself right now, whether this word confirmed something you already suspected or introduced language for something you had not yet named, know that you are not walking through this alone. Samuel had Eli nearby, even when he did not yet understand the voice calling him. Moses had a tent outside the camp, and a God who met him there faithfully, appointment after appointment. Whatever this season requires of you, the same steady presence that met them is available to meet you, exactly where you are, exactly as you are. Before we close, I want to invite you to pause with me here and bring everything we have walked through into a moment of honest prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you grateful for the stirring you have placed in us, even the parts of it that have felt disorienting rather than comfortable. Thank you for not leaving us where we were, for calling something forward in us that had been quietly waiting. We release the roles, relationships, and rhythms that no longer belong to this season, where letting go feels like loss. Meet us with your presence. Where letting go feels like relief, remind us that both responses are welcome in your hands. God, sharpen our discernment so we recognize your whisper beneath the noise around us. Teach us to guard our sensitivity rather than resent it, to protect our solitude rather than apologize for it, and to steward the mission, stirring in us with patience instead of striving. Give us courage to remove the mask we have worn for so long, and grace for the relationships that shift as a result. Strengthen our bodies, minds, and spirits for what you are preparing us to carry, and build around us the kind of community that will test, affirm, and protect what you have spoken. Where fear of being misunderstood has kept us quiet, replace it with quiet confidence rooted in who you say we are. Where impatience has made the waiting feel unbearable, teach us to trust your timing the way we trust your character. Renew our strength daily so that this activation does not become a burden we carry alone, but a gift we steward together with you. Lord, seal this activation in us as something lasting rather than something we simply felt once and forgot. Let our obedience today shape what our children and their children will inherit tomorrow. We trust you with the timing, the details, and the outcome. In Jesus' name, amen. If this word named something you have been carrying quietly, I would love for you to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that what they are feeling is not confusion, but calling. You never know who has been waiting for exactly this language to finally make sense of what they have already been living. Thank you for walking through this with me. Go carrying what has been lit in you and let it burn steady. May God confirm every step ahead of you, guard your heart in the waiting, and finish in you what He has so faithfully begun.